Hey there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to another Red Pill Religion podcast. Red Pill Religion, where amongst the things we say are the belief in the supernatural and transcendent is normal, healthy, rational, and evidence-based. So please support our work on redpillreligion.com. If you like the work we do here, remember that in these days of social media censorship, we can get our channels taken out at any time, but you should always be able to find us on redpillreligion.com, where every day we post new materials. And by the way, we'd appreciate it if you'd hit that PayPal tip jar, or especially that Bitcoin tip jar. We are on Patreon, and we are also now officially on Subscribe Star and Open for Business, and we would love to see our first Subscribe Star patron on there. You get a special phone call from me if you want to be the first one. In any case, also, please find us on gab.com at Red Pill Religion. Find us on Facebook at Red Pill Religion. Find us on minds.com at Red Pill Religion. And if you like, at least for now, we're probably going to close it soon. If you can, you're welcome to join, link in the low bar, our free Discord chat room, if you like talking about history, science, philosophy, religion, and contemporary politics. So in any case, tonight we are joined by, this is actually going to be another atheist-oriented podcast for a little bit, because we are joined by Dave Ross from Catholic Verses. Say hi to everybody, David.
Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, Max, and thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, make sure everybody, please, the link is in the low bar. Go subscribe to Catholic Verses. I like the play on words of the channel because, of course, you hear verses and you think Bible verses. But it's actually, he usually goes one-on-one and does interviews with people. Catholic versus atheist, Catholic versus Catholic, Catholic versus pagan, whatever it is, and they just have a sit-down interview, and they're usually pretty good interviews. Let me ask you, David, when did you start doing this channel? Just a few months ago, or?
No, a couple of years ago. It was the summer of 2016, and it was just to see if I could find any blind spots in my worldview, and to see if there was anyone out there as fanatical and annoying as I am. And so far, haven't found anyone.
Fanatical and annoying. I actually find that fanatical and annoying would be how people usually describe me. You actually have a very even-tempered and thoughtful approach to your videos. What really fascinates me, though, is that you. It also turns out that you are, in fact, one of my fellow former atheists.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, this always fascinates me when I get to talk to another atheist, because whenever, former atheist, I mean, because whenever we get together, we always see things that it seems like, wow, other people don't see. But every story is a little unusual. Do you mind if I ask you about this first?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, why did you become an atheist?
Well, it's unusual. I had a dream, actually, a very pleasant dream about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I was loosely Protestant all my entire childhood up until I had this dream at the age of 14. And it was a very simple dream. I was waving to Jesus, or rather, he was waving to me from one of those cartoon desert islands, the ones that just have one palm tree and it's no bigger than a car, that kind of thing. And he just waved at me, and I woke up and I had lost my faith. So it was very counterintuitive.
Really? Oh, yeah. Like he was waving, really? And it was like you waving goodbye, and you somehow woke up and you didn't think there was a Jesus anymore. That's interesting. So you're Catholic now, obviously. Were you born Catholic, or what's?
No, I was raised in a very loose and a very Protestant, a very liberal Protestant denomination called the United Church of Canada.
Okay.
And I had a naive faith. I would pray every night. We would pray at meals, and we would go to different churches, different Protestant churches growing up. And I loved church. I loved God. I loved praying at night. But at the age of 14, when I had that dream, I lost my faith. And I knew that it was counterintuitive, because you don't have a pleasant dream about Jesus and lose your faith normally. But that's what happened to me. And I attribute it to hormones and, entering puberty. Basically, that's how I see it. It's like the dark years began, my rebellion, my years of sexual frustration, and that went on for 25 years.
25 years. So you were pushing 40, or about almost
39.
40. 39. You changed your mind. Okay, what changed your mind?
Well, I think saying that I changed my mind is a little bit of an oversimplification. I
Oh,
think God revealed himself to me. It's very mysterious, but what we are aware of day to day is is so impoverished. Like, we have no idea what's going on, right? But if we're to tell a little story of our conversion, we can talk about this aspect or that aspect. And what I like to focus on is my intellectual journey through studying Western philosophy. That's what I see. I see that I started out with Socrates and Plato, and I went through the overview of the history of Western philosophy. And by the time I got to Rene Descartes, he was talking about solipsism. And by that point, I had entered into hard solipsism. I thought that I was the only being. So
really?
it's a philosophical journey, but I would like to qualify that by saying that we don't know what's going on. We don't know what contributes to our conversion. I think it's a supernatural gift of God. And I know there were people praying for me. So I attribute it more to prayer and grace than to the intellectual journey. But that was definitely part of it, the intellectual journey.
That is very interesting. I find everybody's story is different. And I have actually met people who had like the almost, you know, like literally Jesus came to them and boom, they were converted. For me, I know the process was many years. Although at this point, you know, I perhaps having been a former atheist, it was so important for me to grasp intellectual, you know, evidence and all that, that I do find that if you're okay, this is an interview. This is just exchanging notes, but still, the heart can know there's a God, but the head can't figure it out. Or the head might be able to figure it out, but the heart may not be there. What's strongest of all is if they're both in line, you know.
Yeah.
Because for the longest time, my faith was formless and I couldn't articulate. Now I can articulate it very well, and that's pretty neat. But to me, the intellectual journey was the more important part, because I suspect my heart was always being pulled towards God, but intellectually I couldn't get over that hump. So actually, the journey was very intellectual for me. It really was, and I guess I could say my faith is a gift. But if so, I kept pushing it back until I could make my mind understand it. I kept trying to give it back. No, I don't know what this is, and then finally, so that was me. So really, it was almost more of a mystical experience for you then, both ways.
Well, I don't know. I think everything that is valuable is a mystery. If something's not a mystery, it's not too interesting. That's not just my opinion. I think that is the reality of things, is that people are interesting because they're persons, and we are made in the image and likeness of God. And what you were saying about the heart-head connection, that's always been a huge theme for me since my conversion. It still is now. And I spend a lot of time thinking about reason and free will and how those two work together. And I'm really leaning more towards the free will as being the place that we should be massaging ourselves and be massaging atheists, because the reason, you know, no one will go to hell because of a defect of the intellect, but everyone that's in hell is in hell because of a defect in their will. It's not a lack of smarts, it's a lack of love that ultimately will decide our fate, right? So it's really, really important for me. I do have a tendency to be cerebral and to live in my head, but at the same time, I do obviously have emotions and I do have free will, and it's just a matter of understanding how they work together and who's wearing the pants in that relationship.
Well, it's interesting too, because a lot of what they say, even modern science has suggested, that people like to think that they have rational reasons for whatever they believe or they don't believe, but most of the time, or that they have rational reasons for doing the things they do. But there's been, you know, psychological studies suggesting that possibly a great majority of the time, we decide what we think, and then we think of the reasons afterwards, or we do whatever we're going to do, and then we try to justify it afterwards. I don't know, and so I do think that points to some of what you're saying. To me, there was no way I was going to be able to be in any religion or religious system of thought if I was terrified of being wrong, and I was terrified of being made a fool of. So it was very, very important for me to be, certain of what I was saying. I want to pitch something interesting at you, because I try and get this around. It's interesting. It's a book by a research psychologist, Paul CVS, which I think more people really need to read. Every time I bring it up, it tends to really annoy atheists. But Paul Vitz is a research psychologist, and he's published this book, which looks at the peer-reviewed and other data we have on ideological atheists, and a shocking number of things come out about it. Now, and actually, although he doesn't get into this, we can get into it too. As it turns out, most children are naturally spiritual, and they develop this as part of very early child development. And being atheist is cutting yourself off from all of it, even if you're not going Christian. You're just kind of cutting yourself off from all of it. And it turns out that people who go full-on atheist, over 90% of us are male. Over 90%. It's a shocking statistic. And over 90% of us, this would include me, I'm not saying anything about you, had terrible father relationships, or completely absent father relationships, or really conflicted father relationships. Greater than 90%. And what we also know is that that one of the things that links that reality is that one of the predictors of religion is in the home is, well, basically it goes like this. No matter how religious mom is, if dad doesn't take it seriously, the kids do not take it seriously. And if dad takes it seriously, they take it seriously. Although if dad takes it seriously and is also a bad dad, the kids will tend to rebel. And it's almost always a father issue, psychologically. At least that's what Paul Vitz showed. And I was shocked when I was going through it, because I'm like, holy cow, this describes me so good, I'm embarrassed. I don't hide the fact of that, but I mean, we have a whole generation of young men now raised without their fathers, and that is who 90% of the self-declared atheist population is, fatherless males, or with very broken father relationships. It's very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to listen to the interview I did with my father, you can go ahead and do that. It's on my website, on all my online presence, and there's also one of my mother, and so I can talk about it pretty openly, because they were willing to come on and actually discuss certain aspects of their faith and of my childhood and stuff like that. And my mom is very open about the fact that she's suicidally depressed and has been for years. And my dad is harder to access. I don't quite know what to say about my dad. I like him. I love him. I think he's a nice guy. I don't have that warmth with him. I do have a certain warmth with him, but it's not the palpable warmth I have with my mother. I see my mother as sunshine, or storm clouds, or a hurricane, or a pleasant spring day, or everything and everything in the emotional weather forecast is possible with my mother. Whereas with my dad, I don't get that variety. I don't get that depth of emotion. I don't get that sense of danger and drama from him. I get stability. I get a certain amount of, calm confidence. It's not quite as exciting for me. I do like him and love him and respect him, but very, very, very different effects in terms of warmth, So does that ring true from what you read about relationships with the father? Can't hear you.
I apologize. Tech issue between chair and keyboard. I forgot to unmute. Problem exists between chair. That's an old computer nerd joke. PEPCAG. Problem exists between chair and keyboard. um, but okay, without trying to generalize grossly irresponsible about people who are not present to defend themselves, who I don't even know, and barely knowing you, I would just hazard that if your mother has severe mental health issues, and I'm familiar with that problem myself, and I'm not it happens. What that will usually do, actually, mother, father, whatever, it goes either way. One of them, the parents is suffering severe mental illness. The other parent is going to be compensating in multiple ways. And so it wouldn't surprise me if you wound up getting a lot less attention from your father simply because your mother required more of it. Which that's, don't let your mom hear that and get all mad at me. I don't know anybody here. I'm not judging anybody, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. And if that, I mean, a fractured family relationship pretty much is a bad relationship with a fractured, I don't want to over dramatize, but a fractured relationship with both parents, actually. And so, yeah, part of it may have been a rebellion phase for you against your dad. Again, I don't want to generalize too much, because your parents were religious, but not very. And I don't know. We all have one of the things that's simply undeniable is taking the atheist position, and it is a position, seems to correlate with people who have this kind of some sort of family issue, some sort of rebellion issue, some sort of anger issue, especially toward a father figure. Usually, the way Vitz sees it, and I see great sense in it in me and in other, not everybody, but most of the other atheists I've known. Yeah, it looks like a real hard rebellion against the dad figure, either resentment because he wasn't there, or resentment because he was abusive, or resentment because he was weak, or cold, or whatever. The psychology of that appears to be there. And Paul Fitz is a real research psychologist, so make of it what you will. But I've also found it insightful myself in dealing with atheists, and particularly in the online environment, because once you realize that this is mostly an hysterical emotional condition in most of them, because it is, and you see that it is the behavior, at least in the typical online. I'm an atheist. I want to trumpet my atheism. I want to virtue signal my atheism wherever I go. I want to be condescending and snide to religious people wherever I go. It's always kids that never got decent, boys mostly, who never got decent boundaries set for them by a dad. And the counterintuitive thing for that is, by the way, is frequently they respond much more strongly to a sort of a more traditional masculine, I ain't taking your garbage attitude, get out of here, snowflake. As counterintuitive as that sounds, or just like outright mocking them. Come on, weak sauce. What do you got? Is that all you got? It's just lack of belief. Bricks lack belief. This coma patients lack belief. They're the best atheists. Bricks lack belief completely in God, so they must be the best atheists. Bricks are the best atheists. You say things like that, and certain people are like, "Wow!" But a lot of young men kind of respond to it because they actually, even though they hate you for talking to them that way, they want the challenge, and because they never got the challenge from their dad. That's really how I see it. In most cases, again, everybody's different.
Yeah, my experience with online atheists is quite different from my experience with real life atheists, like my friends who are atheists. Online, people have a lot more, like they go straight to the insults. Like there's no hello, how are you, and who are you. It's just like you're an idiot, you're this, you're that. The insults are the first thing. It's like their opening volley is a bunch of insults. It's like that doesn't happen when you go to a party full of atheists. They don't just start insulting you. They shake your hand and they say, how are you, what do you do for a living, or whatever, right? And maybe by 3 a.m, once you've had too much to drink, maybe then a couple of insults will come out. But online, it's like the first thing.
I actually think some of it is sublimated rage. Like they don't want to act that way in real life, so it comes out online or something. But although I don't know, it's also an age thing, because younger atheists, I find, are a lot more hot-headed and a lot more temperamental and a lot more fragile ego-wise.
Okay.
But that fits with my view that atheism was indoctrinated into the millennial population. And we're probably going to see it reverse itself. Well, I mean, it already is reversing itself, but probably even faster in the coming years.
I'm starting. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, because it's not really irrationally sustainable, and it's also not natural in humans. We've got copious data on it. If you don't become Christian, you're going to become something. Almost nobody stays atheist unless they're really committed to it. And being that level of committed is a lot of work to a hard to defend proposition. That's my take on it.
Yeah. Just as a little sort of joke that's half serious, you know, people talk about privacy, online privacy, and the government knows who I am and they read my emails and all that sort of stuff. Well, I'm starting to think it might not be such a bad idea for the government to gather all this data and then make it public so that when some idiot online is trashing me, not that my feelings are hurt, my feelings are not hurt, I'm just amused by it. But I am always very, very curious. Is this a 13-year-old boy? Or is this a 60-year-old man? Or what is this person that I'm interacting with that is so entertaining, you know? So I'm just having this little fantasy now where the government takes over and they invade everyone's privacy, and then everyone has access to everything. So you can't hide behind a fake moniker online, and everyone knows, you know, basically who you are, what your situation is. And I'm just being silly, but it's a bit of a thought experiment where that would fulfill a certain curiosity that I have when I'm interacting with these people. Honestly, if they say this, if they give me one little hint or clue, like there's this one guy that's been going back and forth with me on the Atheist Experience call-in that I did. I called into the Atheist Experience a couple of years ago, and there's this one guy that just keeps giving me these comments on and on and on and on, and the conversation's going on forever. And he just dropped one little biographical detail, and I was like, it's just like my soul was jubilant. You know, I was just so excited to get little scraps of detail about this is a real human being. This is not a machine that's responding to me. This is a human being with a wife, and I've realized that he lives in England, and all these little pieces of information I find make it easier to love this human being that's lashing out at you so irrationally. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And I will tell you, by the way, although it's gone down, it is a fact. The Red Pill Religion team, which has been running for 3.5 years now, the people who've been with us from the beginning will tell you, they actually do use scripts and robots, especially on Twitter. So, in fact, you might find yourself in an argument with atheists on Twitter and actually be talking to a robot,
Wow.
or a tag team of 2, 3, 4 people on the same account at the same time. They do this, and we've documented it a few times and watched it. And that used to happen somewhat on Facebook, and it used to happen on YouTube too. There's way less of it than it used to be. Basically, because they cut down on YouTube anyway, and Google, they cut down on people's ability to use scripted robots. And because what used to happen, and I'm not kidding you, they would come in, you'd post a video that annoyed the atheist collective, and you'd come in and you'd have hundreds of downvotes and hundreds of comments all over the place, just burying you in negativity. And it looked like a whole swarm of people. Only, you know, it turns out in many cases, we've found out that, you know, it was one guy with a meme, you know, a script and 15 script console and 15, 20 accounts that he flips between. That used to happen. It's become far less common though. It's become far less common. But that was because atheism was and is an organized movement on the internet. And people call you crazy when you say that, but it is. On the other hand, when you get back to the individual atheist, or let's say the atheist has joined one of these online groups, because that's the difference I think you'll find in yourself, and look at the atheist online groups. The atheist online groups are really just places for sad, depressed, mostly young fatherless males hanging out with each other, trying to get a sense of validation. And it's actually really funny because you can even see that in action in the atheist forums online. That 90% male figure, that greater than 90% male figure, yeah, when a female atheist shows up, she's instant celebrity on almost any atheist forum. It's true. It's true, and it's very interesting to watch it. In fact, the whole internet atheist phenomenon, as a former atheist myself, is just fascinating to observe the psychology of them in groups. But when you can get down to the individual, yeah, now all of a sudden you start seeing a real person if they're willing to let you see it. But what they also have to do is maintain this faux pose of intellectual and moral superiority. And I find the only way to deal with it is to find a way to puncture it in them. And so, I'm sorry, I'm not that impressed with you. But in any case, I'm still want to get curious about it and go back to it. So, I mean, it sounds like you had a mystical experience that made you decide you were an atheist, and you had a kind of mystical experience that brought you back, huh?
Yeah, I remember the exact precise moment of each change. So that dream that I had, I've always remembered that moment when I woke up and that I realized I've lost my faith. And I always will remember also the moment where I came back to God. These are very specific memories, very precise settings in space and time. And I cherish both of them because, I mean, that's the journey that I'm on. I do kind of wish that I was just born and raised a saint and just got more and more holy all my life, but that's not my story. That's not my story, unfortunately. So I have to, because I love reality, I love God's reality more than my fantasy. So there's no point sitting around fantasizing that wouldn't it have been great if I had been, some kind of saint my whole life. That's not reality. There's no point in glorifying some fantasy, right? So I do value my journey, even though it's ugly, it's dark, it's full of selfishness and sin.
Okay, so why? So you grew up in a fairly liberal Protestantism, and then middle Canadian, sort of whatever. I can't remember the term I was just reaching for, but why on earth would you go for those crazy idol worshiping, graven image using, Mary worshiping crazy Catholics? Why would you do such a thing?
Well, I think it's important to point out that I was very actively and aggressively anti-Catholic as an atheist. Just to paint a picture, I want to paint a picture for you and for your listeners. I started out at age 14 when I lost my faith. Obviously, I was just very young, very horny, very confused. Girls didn't like me. They still don't like me, so that hasn't changed. Luckily, I'm married, but I'm not allowed to talk about her. She wants nothing to do with my religion, unfortunately, but we'll leave her out of this. But I started out basically as a nice guy atheist. I think agnosticism is sort of a comfortable place for someone that's exploring. And I think the fact that I did find God means that I was seeking all the time. People have asked me, were you ever really an atheist? And sometimes I say yes, of course. Sometimes I say no, of course I wasn't. It changes depending on my perspective in the moment. Is it possible that I was an atheist? I don't know. I still don't know. But I know that I denied God's existence. And for me, that's a good enough sort of a practical definition of atheism. If the words come out of your lips, there is no God, then you're an atheist. Whether your heart is in it or not doesn't really matter, right? But my point is here with this journey, I started out as a nice guy agnostic. And then as I grew older, I got more and more atheistic, more militant. The more I studied Western philosophy as a hobby, ostensibly seeking truth, I guess, I became more and more radical in my atheism. I ended up being an atheistic Satanist, and I went through hard determinism, and I ended up in hard solipsism. But near the end of my atheism, I was very, very anti-Catholic, and most of my hatred was directed towards the Catholic Church. So when I did convert, I thought, okay, I must be a Muslim because I don't want to be Christian. But it just so happens that a book fell into my lap. Someone died in a brutal fire, and my friend is the landlord of the building, and he had a box of religious books that he found in this dead guy's apartment. And he said, oh, well, my friend David's into religion now, so maybe I'll bring him this box of books. And one of the books was the Confessions of St Augustine. I read it, and all my antagonism fell away. I fell in love with St. Augustine. I fell in love with his God. I realized that the triune God is the God that I had discovered through my journey, my conversion. and I fell in love with the church. And it was just a matter of a couple of weeks between finding God and then deciding to be Catholic.
Interesting. And so, in fact, when you found God again, you weren't sure you were going towards Jesus. You just kind of thought probably you were going that way.
Yeah, there's something, my listeners will get sick of me saying this, but I always say this. It's a very important thing for me to emphasize. When I converted to God, I could not have cared less which religion was a true religion. I did not care. I was so excited about God the Father that I just, the feeling inside of me was so strong that I have to publicly worship this God. I have to go and publicly worship him. If it's in a mosque, if it's in a church, if it's in a Jewish temple, I don't care. I don't care. I need to go and I need to publicly worship my God. And then I started, discovering, well, there must be a true religion, because if God is infallible, then it makes sense that he would design religion such that we can have a sure path to him, that there was not just a hardcore agnosticism that we're stuck in. There must be an infallible guide to the saving truths, not to every truth, not to scientific truth, not to scientific history, but to salvation history. We would have to have an infallible way to know the things that are essential to know to get back to God. So that's when I started looking into religion, and it really wasn't that hard. There's Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and I ended up in the Catholic Church.
Well, it's fascinating to me too. I mean, again, we both wound up in the same church, which is, I happen to think, the correct one too. But love my Orthodox brothers, by the way. But anyway, yeah. Oh, I see. Our favorite troll, one of our favorite trolls, him and Derek, Charlie Reed, is here, and Charlie says atheism is lack of indoctrination. No, I'm afraid you were indoctrinated into it pretty good there, Charlie. Your worldview is very describable, and the fact that it is should disturb you. Also, he says, I was obviously never an atheist. And I claim, see, I love that. I was never an atheist. I get that line all the time, which is really funny, because it's like, if atheism is non-ideological and is lack of belief and lack of lack of belief, lack of religion, lack of faith, lack of anything, why on earth would you feel that you have to define who is a real atheist and who is not? Sir, do you want to see my Penn and Teller bullshit box set? Do you want to see my book collection of the God Delusion and books by Steven Pinker and Stephen Hawking and do we need an atheist license? I'll tell you what, my story actually is kind of the opposite of yours, David, which is I did reach a point in my atheism where I decided I would really like to believe in God, and I couldn't. I literally could not think of why you would think there was a God. I wanted to believe there was one, and I couldn't think of I couldn't think of a reason. It was like a mental block. It really was. I almost felt like, my brain was in a box. And for a while there, it was just, I was like, there's this phrase they use in Alcoholics Anonymous, which I used to go to. Not currently a member, but still a supporter. Which was fake it till you make it, which is like your heart is there, but your head is not.
Yeah.
It was almost kind of Pascal's wager situation. If people know anything about Pascal's wager, the online internet atheist collective puts up Pascal's wager, and they always state it dead wrong, because Pascal's wager was the short, stupid version of it is, it's better to believe than not, because if you're wrong, nothing happens. But if you're right, you get to go to heaven and stuff like that. But that's really simplified, because by the time Pascal formulated that, he was already no longer an atheist, and that wasn't his reason. He was literally writing his advice for people who were still struggling to believe. And he said, if nothing else convinces you, think of it this way, and then go try living the spiritual life, and go to church, take the sacraments, participate, open yourself to it, and things will come to you. And I kind of went along that way. In fact, for the longest time, I was telling myself, this may all just be psychological benefit that I'm getting in some kind of primitive, Jungian, maybe it's not real, but I'm going with it anyway. Sometimes I had that attitude because my intellect could not grasp the idea of God. And then one day it was like something got ripped off my brain, like a belt got ripped off my brain, and I stopped accepting materialist thinking. And then all of a sudden it became completely obvious to me that there had to be a God. And I guess you could say that was a religious experience. Maybe that was God changing things for me, or saying now it's time. But that would mean that God made me an atheist, or wanted me to be an atheist, or was cooperating all along, which I don't even find implausible. I have heard some Christians, lose their minds, and they say people have no, I'm not even going to try and quote the verses, but they'll say, no, everybody has no excuse. I think it's obvious that there's a God. But I really, for the longest time, I remember having conversations with Jewish friends and Christian friends. It's like, okay, this all sounds good, but why do you believe this is even real at all? And I had endless conversations like that, until finally one day I went, whop, and now I can explain to anybody exactly why I believe what I believe. Bring it. I'll bring it, anybody. Charlie Reed, by the way, still has that open invitation along with Dirac to come get on a stream with me sometime. Just have to submit to my cross-examination, boys. I don't think you'll last long. Because atheism is a belief, and it's a dumb one. But anyway.
I'll come on your stream. I don't mind.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. One thing we're doing, we are actually kind of running low because we try to keep these between 40 and 60 minutes, just so you and everybody knows. It's just kind of an open thing. After this, we will be doing an informal live stream, which we do every night. We have called it basically the bull session. Every night we go a couple of hours after the show and talk about current events, politics, philosophy. Anybody listening in is free to join us on that on the Max D and Esme group channel. I'll be sure to put a link in the low bar. And you're welcome to come to that tonight or some other night if you like.
Cool.
But in any case, why did you, so I had asked you this before, but now we kind of know who you are and where you're coming from better. What's your real goal with your channel?
Well, there are many ways of interpreting reality. I don't know what I'm doing. As I said in the very first segment of the show, I don't really know what I'm doing or why, but some of the ideas that come to mind are to meet people, to get challenged in my faith, to see if I'm believing a lie, and if so, to abandon Jesus Christ. There has been nothing even remotely close to a challenge to my faith. It is so pathetic how little there is in terms of counter arguments against Christianity. Is just, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing.
Well, they just assert that there's no evidence. They're done.
Yeah, but the thing I'm most excited about with my podcast is not meeting people and learning a little bit about their faith journey or their worldview. What's most exciting is that I enroll each and every one of my guests in a perpetual mass, which means that they and their families will benefit from the infinite graces of the holy sacrifice of the mass every day until the end of time, when Jesus Christ comes again at the end of time. Every day between when I purchase, quote unquote purchase, when I make a donation and then their name goes on this list, there's a mass being said for them and for their family. So what I really think that I'm doing when I interview, for example, a hardcore atheist like Aaron Ra, is I'm providing a little bit of entertainment, and it's drawing lots and lots and lots of hungry sharks to my channel. There's so many atheists coming to my YouTube now because of Aaron Ra, and I thanked him publicly and I thanked him privately many times for that, because he's drawing a lot of people. But what they don't realize is that when I'm interacting with these people in the comments section, I don't care if I lose the argument. I'm praying for them, right? It's an open secret that I'm praying for these people. I could care less about losing some petty argument. And then in terms of the guests, like Aaron Ra himself, he's getting a mass said for himself and his family every day. That's infinite grace. And if he doesn't, if he says no, finally in the end, if he says no to all of that grace, it goes somewhere. God doesn't waste any of it. All of that grace is going to go to someone that will say yes to those graces. So I've got 100, and I think I'm up to 160 masses that are being said every day around the world for my guests. And that's every day until the end of time.
Okay. That now good, because I've been a guest once. That means I get that too.
Yep.
Cool. I need to add you to my daily rosary intentions.
Yes, please.
I generally play 20 decades a day on average, so we'll
Wow.
have you in there. I'm very Marian dude, but anyway, this is about you, but we do like to keep track. Because Charlie is in the comments asking, so you wanted to believe why? I'll tell you why I wanted to believe. I'll go ahead and give you. I was online lynched more than 10 years ago by the atheist community for having the wrong thought. Because when you look at atheists in groups online, they definitely indulge in groupthink, and they destroy anybody who goes outside the groupthink. And I got destroyed, and I realized these people were horrible. I was also struggling with a terrible alcohol problem and other problems in my life, and I wanted to quit. And I couldn't quit, and the AA people said, this God thing, you've got to get at least some God of your understanding, or it won't work. And I could visibly see that the people who were taking the God thing seriously were doing better and had better long-term results than those who didn't. And I really wanted to quit. And so when they said, okay, I can give you all the evidence you want, but if you're not going to accept it, then, or if it doesn't make sense to you, fake it till you make it. Pretend you believe anyway. Pretend it's just a psychological thing. Whatever you got to do, pretend there's a God. And so that's where I was for the longest time. I wasn't even Catholic really that much, but Catholicism ran on a different path. But I couldn't get it. And then I realized at some point, intellectually I was being retarded. I was looking for a material explanation for a non-material entity. I mean, literally, that's what I was looking for. I was looking for a material explanation for something that has no material basis. And once that snapped out of that, and once I realized that the laws of physics and probability can't be running themselves, they're too orderly and intelligible. Something intelligence must underlie or transcend or drive things like the laws of physics and probability, the logic that runs the universe itself. I was like, oh, duh, I'm dumb. We're like inside God's mind. I mean, that's just a generalization. Somebody don't attack me theologically, but that's where I was. And then that, Charlie, is when I began to realize that the atheist worldview makes no sense at all, because it doesn't. And it is a belief, my friend. Sorry, atheism is totally a belief. But all right, I derailed there. So what have you got coming? Huh?
I was just going to mention about the AA thing. I've never done any of those 12 steps, but I have got friends who have done them, and they talk about the pink cloud experience.
Yeah.
I've been riding on the pink cloud since my conversion in 2009. It's a constant high. I mean, I'm just constantly high all the time since my conversion. Now I have God in my life. Now I can there can be little ebbs and flows in that. I need to nurture that flame of faith. But when you are paying attention to the fact that God is real and that you are the child of this loving God, it is like being high. It is like being inebriated. It is like being drunk. I mean, I think people already think I'm insane, but they'd really think I was insane if they saw how I just spontaneously, am brought to tears or brought to laughter just by a contemplation of a simple fact about reality. There is a real inebriation that I experience. I don't know I mean, this might be purely psychological. I might just be insane. But what do you say about this pink cloud? Did you experience it?
Well, within AA circles, for anybody who doesn't know, AA and Narcotics Anonymous and a bunch of others, they have these 12 steps, which are pretty functional. The first two steps are usually the hardest, but the third one is the one that most alcoholics and addicts run straight into. Step 3 is try to make conscious contact with God as we understood Him. It's not Christian. A lot of people in AA are even anti-Christian, although they try and tamp it down because you respect other people's views. So it was just more of a philosophical in how you came to understand God. But even so, it was obvious that this helped most people, especially the long-term ones. And in any case, the pink cloud is something they refer to in AA, where basically you have gotten free of your addiction. You've gotten physically free of your addiction, whatever it is, like the withdrawals and everything else, and you've gotten to where you can handle life without your chemical of choice. And you feel really good because your health improves and your clarity of mind improves, and you find yourself on a pink cloud. But then, of course, life gets tough and the pink cloud evaporates. And what happens to a lot of guys, drunks, is they get drunk and go and get drunk again because the pink cloud, that great high feeling, went away. And so actually we usually warn about the pink cloud. Now, a sustained pink cloud of a decade is probably something more than that AA experience. I will tell you that, though, that I have had spiritual experiences that did have me on a high, and I do have a sustained awareness of God that's like 24/7, which is kind of interesting, even when I'm being bad. But at the same time, and there's a lot of sources that'll warn you about this. You still may go through something called the dark night of the soul, where somehow you're not feeling it anymore. And if that never happens to you, great. On the other hand, Mother Teresa suffered it for decades. She never stopped. And I have gone through periods where it's like, oh, I'm not feeling it anymore. I mean, intellectually I'm there, but my heart's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And that's actually to me is actually when the more Orthodox Catholic way really kicks in, because if you've developed a life of consistent prayer and consistent praxis, and taking the sacraments and doing the liturgy, even when you're not feeling it, it's called for persevering. Because, the Bible does, and the scriptures does, and the Christian history does show time again. We live in a valley of tears. Horrible things are going to happen. You might die of cancer, or your most loved person may get killed in front of you, or you may lose your home. Everything may go bad. And that's when the pink cloud test gets really tested. And the only thing I'll say is, if anything bad happens, start studying things like the book of Job, if you ever start struggling with that. But I do see what you mean, because yes, being aware that there's a God, and it changes everything about how you see the universe. We should probably close this up, although Charlie asks, and I'm going to go ahead and answer his question, what evidence is there? Charlie, we have evidence that there is a God and an afterlife in at least 15 different areas of contemporary science that I'm willing to talk to you about, along with at least a dozen classical proofs that have never been debunked, and we have ample experience. So my question to you would be twofold, and it's to all your fellow atheists. Which evidence have you examined, and why did you dismiss it? And if there's evidence that you haven't seen, tell me what kind of evidence works for you. Logical and observational proofs? Do you want to look at what's in contemporary science? What do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about personal experience? What do you want as evidence? What do you define as evidence? What will you accept as evidence? And no arm-waving generalizations, please. But if you say peer-reviewed papers, I have those too. You can still dispute them, because, and this is the last thing I'd point out, you can be skeptical of anything for any reason at any time. You can be skeptical of anybody or anything for any reason at any time. And you can choose to dismiss the evidence all you want. The one thing that is true is there is evidence. So the real question is, why do you dismiss the evidence? And which evidence have you seen? And which evidence have you not? What evidence would prove you? And I think what would move you, or at least challenge you? Let me know. Let Dave know. Did you have anything to add to that, Dave?
Yeah, I have two questions. Is there a first cause or not? So that's a true dichotomy. That means that there's no middle way. You have to decide and follow your decision to its logical conclusions. And then the second question is the first cause natural or not? And just by answering those two questions, you end up with the God of monotheism, the God of classical theism, who is all-powerful, who is non-temporal, who is non-spatial, who is infinite in every perfection. And so it takes answering two questions honestly. But from my experience, atheists who are not ready in their will meaning with the amount of love they have. It's a matter of loving God unto contempt of self, rather than loving self unto contempt of God. If you're not there yet, there's no intellectual exercise that will help you. It's all about love. But if you want to play with the intellectual side, it can prepare your heart. So think about those two simple questions. Is there a first cause, and is it natural? And if you answer honestly, you'll end up with God. That's it. It's that easy.
Okay, well, Charlie was trying there, but now he's just going after the Bible. Dude, don't even look at a Bible. Seriously. You're not smart enough to read the Bible. And I don't even hesitate to say that. You're not. You don't even know that there's a God. Why would you read that thing? All right. Well, tell you what, this has been a great deal of fun, and I really enjoyed talking to you, David. Did you?
Yes.
Everybody be sure to check out David's Catholic Versus channel on YouTube. He's on Subscribestar. He's on Patreon, and probably other things as well. More details on his channel. Tomorrow night, actually, I don't know what we're doing tomorrow night. I think I'm going to have up one of our atheist response videos. And as usual, I will mention again, over on the Max Dean Esme group channel, we have an open stream where guys get together, talk and BS about politics, philosophy, and such. We're going to open up talking about what happened at the Covington Catholic School kids. And then we're going to see where it goes, because we usually run a couple hours and just have fun talking like guys. So in any case, here on the Red Pill Religion channel, please remember we're a new channel, Red Pill Religion. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like. Please hit the notification button. Remember, hit us on redpillreligion.com, where every day we got new stuff, and our fundraising and our tip jar stuff is there. So see you tomorrow, and God bless everybody.